we're going to talk about the top 10 and launch it formally. But first, let's talk about the Agentic Security Initiative, because as Scott said, the top 10 isn't something that's just emerged in our heads. When we started this conversation back in the 25 with the excessive agency, those of you who do LLM applications, we'll talk about excessive agency. And we had those usual robust debates that we have at OWASP. Is that enough or not? And instead of going for a top 10, we decided to create an initiative where we completely understand what's happening in the landscape. And very quickly, that initiative became a massive team. And I'm very, very proud to have there the core team that we have. There will be some videos that they introduce themselves later in the YouTube, but they created this security and innovation at scale. And not just that, we decided that in today's world, everyone can go to ChatGPT and generate content. So how do we make sure that, as Scott said, we respond to the challenges at the pace of innovation, at the pace of change? So how do we do that without becoming bureaucratic and without becoming formal like ISO? We do that by having the community itself doing the peer review, having all of you, being open to all of you, but also having a distinguished expert board there, people from NIST, people from, I'm sure you all know Hiram, people from Microsoft, from AWS, Dan Jones here from Microsoft. So, and we have that editorial control that everything gets reviewed, and we have robust conversations. We like robust conversations. So if you enjoy them, come and join us. And as part of that, as Scott said, we didn't jump into an opinionated top 10 because it was too early. In fact, we focused on covering the entire life cycle, and those documents have been very popular. So if you want to go into depth, those documents are still there. We'll be refreshing them to match the top 10, but very much, very detailed, validated guidance. We cover the tools. We also cover governance and the state of security, agentic AI and governance. I got it right? And because we renamed that document a couple of times. But we also don't like the rubbish of just producing content. So having vulnerabilities in code, Ali Ha, one of our core team members, leading that. And also very recently, we created the collective with a new initiative, a CTF platform. I don't know if Helen, do you mind kind of standing up and say, are you there? Yeah, so big round of applause. A massive advancement with how we educate people. When I go and do lectures at universities, they say we don't want to read things, we want to play with things. So that's what the CTF is doing. So those are the things that we did before. And then all of a sudden we saw that the landscape is changing. It isn't, when we did a webinar from the beginning of the top 10 for LLMs, where there was theoretical possibilities. Now things are happening. In fact, if you go to that QR code there, if you're watching this on YouTube or here, we track that consistently and constantly, all the incidents. And we realize that actually things are happening now faster. And so why then go for an OWASP top 10 if we have all those documents and guidelines? Well, if you put them all together, like something like 270 pages, and I don't know about you, I don't have the time to read 207 pages. They're very good reference material. You can dive in, you can find, you can use, Notebook LLM or ChatGPT to advise them, but you need a compass. And that's why we launched, the kickoff was back in the summer, to start consulting with the industry on the top 10 and summarizing what we have. To cover this evolving landscape, that's why we started tracking those vulnerabilities. But also we realized that there were standards coming out that making reference to agentic. And we didn't want that, there is a bit of standards fatigue actually, many people covering the same thing. It's great to have many voices, but we need that aligned narrative. And that's why we went out of our way to make sure that we map to those standards so there isn't that cacophony that will confuse you. And above all, we decided to do, with my partner in crime here, to do a mass scale consultation. You have absolutely no idea how many people we talk to. We memorize our lines at the end. We talk to end user organizations, we talk to vendors, we talk to the government organizations.
Some of them are here today.
Exactly, yes. Some of you are here today. We thank you. But also, organizations like, I'm really grateful to the UK's National Cybersecurity Council, also Centre helping us. organizations like the FCA, Airbus, they all gave us good insights and helped us evolve this. And that's how we got to the top 10. Karen, are you ready?
Is that the time?
Is that the time? Are you ready?
Yes.
Why don't we have a nice little countdown then to reveal the top 10? Yeah, for 10. Come on. 10,
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
There it is. Well, as John said, we worked on it so long, so I'm beyond excited talking about it. So forgive me for any mistakes, but I think we all very familiar with prompt injection and jailbreak. And honestly, I don't think anyone in the room can hear about it anymore, right? But the main shift that we wanted to emphasize over here is that once we moved from LLMs to agents, prompt injection and jailbreak are not only data exfiltration, they're about changing the intention of the agent and actually manipulating its goals. So that's why we chose to start with SI first on Agent Go hijack, and Kyla here will cover that very shortly soon. The second one is the tool misuse and exploitation, and I think there's some kind of confusion between that and the fourth one, which is the agentic supply chain. So I'll cover that very briefly, and Evgeny later on will talk about it. But what we're meaning here is that sometimes agent can have access to legitimate tools, right? Because that's the entire purpose of agentic AI, right? So imagine your agent connected to a tool and then an attacker exploiting it by prompt injection, by context injection, or any other adversarial as we know it. So that's an important issue that we wanted to bring in, because in that scenario, you have legitimate tools that are manipulated. The third one is the identity and privilege abuse, which is widely spoken in many other security domains. But the thing about here is, how do we know if the agent that is actually has access to many data and many tools and many actions? How do we know what's the identity of the users that actually access to it, and what are they allowed to see and what are they allowed to do? So that's just one example, but think about multi-agent systems and how it goes wrong, right? So the fourth one, I started to talk about it, but we're talking over here about squatted tools, about manipulated tools that are trying to connect to your agents. I think everybody knows MCP, right? That's the new cool kid in the block. But that's just one example for supply chain vulnerability that can go wrong. Okay, it's not just applications like old times that try to connect to you, or like malicious URLs, but we're talking about malicious tools, malicious agents that are trying to send you manipulated output or input in runtime, right? The fifth one will be how agent can execute code if they given the wrong input. And imagine what's going to happen if this agent is heavily embedded into your workflows. The sixth one, I have to admit, is one of my favorites. It is memory and context injection. And the reason that I think that it is super interesting is that when we were talking about LLM security, we were focusing about the prompts and the user interactions. Obviously, we had data poisoning, which is some sort of similar, but with that in mind, what scares me the most is that the attack is invisible. You know, I can implement prompt injection either in the memory or in the rack. For example, I can send you an email or an invite, as you all know. And then what can happen is that the output could be manipulated, the workflow could be hijacked, and nobody knows about it. All right, so the seventh one is mostly about how agents connect and communicate with each other. So it's not only human language and human interactions that could cause the malicious effect, but also agents that connect with each other and how it look like in multi-agent system. The eighth one is one of my favorite, and I want John to soon react to that, but cascading failures, talking about when we have systems that are composed of so many agents, tools, and other agentic components. Think about them working together, having one of them being poisoned, having one of them having the wrong context, and what will happen in there. So I know I can tell you that many governments are now dealing with this question, and I get to advise them and to see that part of their disaster recovery plan is to understand what to do with cascading failures of agents. We're almost there. Bear with me. So the ninth one talking about the human agent trust exploitation, and it talks about over-reliance on AI, how people take what AI says and then they take it as granted, but also like how can AI turn people to do risky actions, for example, click on that URL, but when it comes to agentic, think about actions in your workflow, in your operational lines, and how it look like. And the last one will be RAG agents that Tomer will soon be covered, but think about an agent that suddenly became malicious. How does it look like? Yes, John.
Don't think about James Bond. We're not talking about that kind of. We're talking about what we used to call, and I think that's an excellent introduction there. What was just going back and forth with single interactions, now it becomes complex. You have a whole journey to understand. So I love the identity question there. If your agent does something wrong, will the agent be identifiable or will end up being in court? So that agentic, how do we flow that identity is important? Cascading failures, I have this nice example someone said, most of the security tooling is using AI, or at least they're claiming, everyone's kind of so keen to use AI. Imagine a scenario where all your firewalls, there is one of them, one agent there that says attack, 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 and then all of a sudden, all of them respond to that by locking you down. And that's why you said about governments, that's why it's really important to safeguard when you have critical decisions to understand how those failures are going to be cascaded.
And John, if I may, it's not only government, because as we're all running to embed those agentic workflows into our companies, and we're creating those chains of agents, which could be super helpful. And don't get me wrong, I'm highly advocating you to do that. But we don't understand the implication of that. We don't think one step forward, and that's why we wanted to highlight it.
Exactly. And I think, that's the point there is this. When we move from LLM top 10 to agentic top 10, think about those additional interactions, whether they're between your users and your data sources, or whether it's between different agents amongst them, of how they cascade, of how they communicate. So, okay, stop, that's okay. Shall we move to the next one?
Yeah, I think we created this little script for you, because this diagram, because we wanted to really emphasize about how it is not only user interactions with LLM anymore. So the user is now using the agent to have access to data, to have access to tools, not only internally in the company, but outside of the company. And I think we don't grasp that the way that it is. Think about users now having access to all of the tools that you're enabling your agents to have. That's the right way to think about it. Think about your workflow in your company that are empowered by agents, exposed to all of those tools and MCPs and A2A connections that are enabled to your agents. And to make that 1 + 1, which equal more than 2, unfortunately, I think this diagram is super helpful. So we want you to use that. We want you to have it so it be memorable. And every time you have a new agent in your company, I really encourage you to ask those questions, to take this diagram and try to map the different parts that you have of your agent and ask those questions. So how my user interacting with the agent? What is their intention compared to the agent intention? How is the agent interacting with the external tools or with the external connections? Does it align with its goal? So those are just examples, but I really encourage you to take that diagram as a tool for you in your daily life.
We're giving you a freebie for threat modeling, so have no excuses not to do threat modeling for Agentic. Take this diagram and the batteries run out, and apply it to your organization the use case. Because we also, I think we're going to go to the next one when I need this, that's run out of battery. I think what Karen has very beautifully done there is starting teeing that not all those problems are going to be everywhere. You need to understand where in your application and your system those risks apply and take the mitigations. But we also understand that, we also understand that the mitigations will change. So we're not just filtering input and output. You now need to secure all the inputs to your system. You need to put telemetry and report and monitoring there, because drift will happen. Rogue agents will appear. How many of you have read the recent paper from OpenAI on hallucinations? Any of you? So it turns out actually, hallucinations are because we're emphasizing one goal. So that can happen. That drift can happen. So you need to monitor that.
I think another piece of information that I want to share with you today is that sometimes we're kind of naive thinking that users are using the agent for the purpose that we created it for. But I can tell you, because in my day-to-day job, and my friends over here doing that too, we're looking over many, many user prompts and many, many agents actions. And we see that those users are not that naive. And even if they're not malicious, they're trying to play with the agent and think about a user that is just playful with the agent and end up, transferring money to his account, or just doing the wrong action that we weren't thinking about. Okay, so that's about how we want to look into the intention of the user. I call it intent. And then, John, you were speaking a lot about the identity aspect of the mitigations.
Yes, I think identity is becoming a big factor, non-repudiation and all that. We see many different standards emerging. We started with the agentic naming service that actually being deployed by GoDaddy in production. We're seeing vendors like Microsoft introducing identity, but make sure you have a story about it. That you look at those tools, use timed credentials, and make sure they don't leak, because delegation and impersonation will happen. So make sure, and especially when you have a multi-agentic environment where different agents communicate with each other, which makes actually supply chain very interesting, doesn't it? Forget about just libraries. Imagine different agents talking to each other. So having both, which is why that's so important to have Helen creating that initiative. And
I think another important mitigation that I'm taking out of this work that I want to push you through is, validating the tools. Because when we have application that is connected to our workflows, we do such amazing work on checking it out, making sure we know what it's doing. And when it comes to those agentic tools, we never look at that, right? So, for example, think about people in your organization that are using Microsoft Copilot or Google Gemini. They can just execute some of those tools, and we don't even know which are those tools. Even if they're legitimate, what are they doing? Are they exposing any data? Are they exposing any actions that we don't want to do, or at least we want to monitor it? And I'm not talking even about malicious tools that need to be verified, just as we're doing with code libraries, right? So that's the same in the agentic world.
And if you think about Replit, their tool wasn't malicious at all, but it was on production and it deleted their entire database. So please don't put things directly into production. Do the good hygiene, do the sandboxing, make sure you don't trust agents uncritically. Should we go to the next one?
Yeah.
Okay, let's move it because we're running actually slightly. And so we also understand that all those threats and mitigations that we have, they're not going to be applicable day one. When we talk about agentic AI, we always find ourselves as always being ahead of the curve, and that's a good thing, because we can come and tell you about the new things that are coming, but also we're aware that you're not always at that end of the journey. Not all of you, in fact, I would very much doubt if many of you have multi-agents in production. So we want to take you through that journey, and we want to help you understand, and there will be an update on the state of agentic AI governance, giving you more resources on that, how to actually map your top 10 to your own journey, starting from the simple copilot that most organizations use today, moving to the Power Automate, and all the way to custom pilots and copilots and distributed agents. And that's why we think we are today not just announcing the Agentic Top 10, but we're announcing a program that will take the top 10 and make it part of making change. The game is asymmetrical, so we need to work together, not just to give you documents to read and maybe sometimes fall asleep, but to make them part of what you do. So I'm really proud today to announce the Make It Happen. I'm sure we'll rename it. It's a kind of a very simple name for now, where it targets different aspects of how do we bring change. And the first one that we love, and I know Karen loves, is...
All right, so our mission is to see you actually gain value of what we created. So our first challenge, are you ready for it? Will be, all right, so we're going to have a conference day at the RSA in San Francisco very soon in March. We want to see how you implemented the Agentic Top 10 in your companies. So we call all of you to assign your papers and to share with us how have you implemented that in your companies and how have you improved your posture during that time. And we will give the winners, or the most expressive companies, to actually present their work at the RSA Summit that we're going to have. So I really want to see all of you getting value out of what we've done.
And I think that's a great way to incentivize you, but also to make that conversation not just when we release documents. So we will support that journey. In fact, we're talking with Scott to bringing a self-certification scheme, but let us have that conversation of how we can help you make that part of your journey. And if we achieve that, I think it will be fantastic to have you on RSA, but I think it will be a major, major victory for AI security adoption. We also understand that these are emerging challenges, so not all the mitigations will be ready out of the box. And that's why we're partnering with academia, with startups, with research organizations. We're talking to Laser, we're going to an event tomorrow that's hosted by Microsoft. How can we create opportunities? How can we inform the research agenda on the things? We talk about an intent capsule in our document. What does that mean? How do we give you something that actually you can take it and just deploy it instead of having your engineering team creating mitigations from scratch? So that's the mitigation accelerators. The code samples and hackathons, we already have it in place with the CTF. We'll just uplift it and make sure that focuses on the top 10. And finally, we want to invite people from the industry. And my co-lead, Ron Rosario, who I hope is watching. Thank you, Ron, for this. We're bringing in people like a security architect from Lovable to write a separate piece about secure vibe coding. So if any of you are in the middle of something that's as impactful as vibe coding or identity, come and talk to us, and we'll bring your voice into the work that we do. Right, before we do that, I accidentally skipped a slide that is really, really important, and we shouldn't have. So this work, you will hear from the entry leads, and you'll think, my goodness, what's this entry leads? How many leads can an initiative have? As many as we need. So we started this back in the summer. I did a kickoff. We started the public draft, and then joined by the most energetic person ever to work with, Karen, that's kind of delivered that. And Ron, my co-lead for the initiative, helped you. But the real work was really down to the entry leads that you'll see them there, kind of a nice diagram like an arrow there. We couldn't have all of them here today. We thank them, but we have a few of them that will take us in a few lightning talks, a few dive-ins into the top 10.
So if I may add, I wanted to, first of all, thank John, Ron, Scott, and Steve. I hope you're watching us for all of your contribution and hard work